I always believed that trust was earned. I never gave it freely, not after the childhood I had. But Alicia, she broke through my walls. She smiled like she meant it. She listened when no one else did. When I couldn't afford dinner, she brought me sandwiches wrapped in napkins with dumb little hearts drawn on them. So when she leaned across our penthouse balcony, eyes glowing in the city lights, and whispered, "Let's get married, Caleb," I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Peace. Not excitement. Not even love, really. Just peace. Like maybe I didn't have to fight anymore. "You're sure?" I asked. She nodded, brushed back her chestnut hair, and kissed me. "It's time. I want to be yours. Completely." 2 weeks later, she brought the marriage paperwork. Pre-signed, tied in a leather folder, a contract, a prenup. That should have been my first red flag. But she looked at me with that same face she wore 5 years ago when she sat beside me in a freezing apartment and said, "Don't give up." I took the folder. "You didn't need to do all this." "I just want everything to be clean," she smiled. "You're a public figure now. I'm protecting you too." I flipped through it. It was thick. Too thick for something she claimed was just formality. Somewhere in the middle, I saw a clause about future equity, another about rights to our shared properties, should certain performance metrics not be met. Performance metrics? In a marriage? I looked at her. She was watching me, but her eyes weren't soft. They were calculating. Calm. As if she knew I wouldn't walk away. "You trust me, right?" she asked quietly. I forced a smile and nodded. "Yeah, I do." That was my first lie. She stood up, walked around the table, and wrapped her arms around my neck. "Then let's make it official. I already set the appointment. Next Friday." I should have walked. I should have torn the contract in half and asked her why love needed a trapdoor. But I didn't. Because part of me, the tired, lonely, worn-out part, wanted to believe the lie in her eyes was still love. The contract sat on the edge of my nightstand for 3 days. I didn't touch it, didn't open it again. It felt radioactive, like something I wasn't supposed to get too close to, but it also wouldn't leave my mind. I kept hearing her voice. "You're a public figure now. I'm protecting you too." I'd spent half my life digging out of holes other people left me in, so why did I feel like I was about to jump into one willingly? On the 4th night, I called someone I hadn't spoken to in nearly a year. "Caleb? Damn, thought you forgot about me. Still billing $200 an hour, John?" $250 now, but for you, I'll consider it robbery." I smirked. John Bennett, college roommate, now full-time corporate attorney and part-time smartass. He owed me a favor, or 3. "I need a second opinion on something. Quietly. Send it over," he said, and I did. By noon the next day, I had his reply. "You're not marrying her. You're merging with her. This contract is a business acquisition, not a prenup." I stared at the screen for a long time. Then I read his follow-up. "Clause 17, read it. Slowly." I did. Clause 17 outlined Alicia's right to reasonable participation in the executive operations of any jointly owned entities, including, but not limited to, decisions related to investment, hiring, and restructuring. Translation: if we ever shared a business, current or future, she'd have leverage to influence or override key decisions. Another clause mentioned dissolution procedures tied to behavior-based conditions, infidelity, substantial neglect, reputational harm, subjective terms, legal landmines. My stomach turned. I called John back. "You think she's trying to screw me?" "I think she's smart, cold, strategic. This isn't something you draft unless you're planning for a battlefield." I wanted to argue. I wanted to say she wasn't like that. That she was the girl who snuck into my dorm with peanut butter sandwiches when I couldn't afford dinner. The woman who stayed up all night helping me design the first pitch deck for my startup. But then I remembered the way she watched me when I was reading the contract. Calm, calculating. "Tell me straight," I said. "If your client showed you this prenup, what would you say?" "I'd say don't sign it. And if you already did, lawyer up and get ahead of it." I hung up without answering. That night, Alicia came home late. Said she was with a friend. Her dress looked new. Her perfume was stronger than usual. I said nothing. She curled up beside me in bed like nothing was wrong, laid her head on my chest, whispered, "Only a few days left." I nodded, kissed her hair, and said, "I can't wait." That was my second lie. By morning, I'd started a private file, copies of the contract, audio notes, and a list of people who could confirm or deny how deeply Alicia had her hands in my life. I didn't know what I was looking for, but I knew I couldn't pretend anymore. I spent the next few days in silence, not the absence of noise kind, but that cold, calculating silence you slip into when you realize you've been walking toward a cliff blindfolded. Alicia was acting like nothing had changed. She kissed me in the morning, texted during the day, sent photos of wedding cake samples and floral arrangements. I nodded, smiled, replied when necessary. But inside, I was listening for cracks, looking for proof. I started with her laptop. I'd never snooped before, never had to. But one evening when she left for a dress fitting, I watched her close the silver MacBook without logging out. 30 seconds after the front door shut, I was at her desk. Her browser history was clean, too clean, as if someone had wiped it manually, but she'd left her calendar open. I scrolled back 2 months and found something strange. Lunch, CR, Palomar Hotel. I didn't know anyone with those initials. But the Palomar Hotel? That wasn't where you took friends for lunch. That was where you took clients. Or secrets. I took a screenshot and saved it to a flash drive. Then I found emails. Buried in a folder marked Archive Legal was a thread between her and a name I hadn't heard in years. Carson Rayner, managing partner, Bellstone and Pike. He used to be my competitor's personal attorney, cutthroat, obscenely expensive. I once watched him kill a merger with one phone call. What the hell was Alicia doing emailing him? Most of the messages were encrypted PDFs I couldn't open. But one thing was clear. The prenup didn't come from a wedding planner or a DIY website. It came from Bellstone and Pike, commissioned months ago, long before she ever proposed. That night, when she came home humming and glowing from her fitting, I felt something harden inside me. She stood in front of the mirror, twirling, asking if I liked the dress she picked. A photo on her phone, ivory and sleeveless with intricate embroidery. I forced a smile. It's perfect. That was my third lie. The next morning, I called John. "She's working with Carson Rayner," I said. A long pause. "You're kidding." "Emails. A meeting 2 months ago. The prenup came from his office." John let out a low whistle. "That's not wedding prep. That's corporate warfare. You need to assume you're being played, Caleb, fully." "I already do. You gonna confront her?" "Not yet. She's planned this for months. If I go in now, she'll pivot. I want to know what she really wants. The company, the IP, or something else." He was quiet for a moment. "You think she ever actually loved you?" "I think she loved the idea of me, the potential, the climb." John didn't reply. That day I reached out to an old contact from before I made it big, Devin Clark. He was a private investigator, ex-cybercrime division. We hadn't spoken in years, but he owed me. I asked him to find out who Alicia met at the Palomar Hotel that day. He didn't ask why, just said, "Give me 48 hours. I didn't sleep that night. When I closed my eyes, I saw her in every version of our story. The one who brought soup when I was sick. The one who cheered when my app hit 1,000 downloads. The one who held me like I was something solid when everything else felt like sand. And yet, now I saw the same woman drafting battlefield strategies while I dreamed of vows. The silence between us grew, not louder, but sharper. And I knew, one way or another, I was running out of time. Devin called just after noon on a Tuesday. "She met with Carson Rayner," he said. "Lunch reservation was made under his assistant's name, but hotel surveillance confirmed it was him. 90-minute meeting. No public record of what they discussed." I already knew what they discussed. The damn contract. "Anything else?" I asked. He hesitated. "She didn't just meet him once." I leaned back in my chair, jaw tightening. "How many times?" "3 that I can confirm. One was off the books. A private floor booked in Rayner's name 2 months ago. Same week, your company announced the beta launch of the Secure Frame protocol. Secure Frame, my most guarded project. The one Alicia had access to when she helped coordinate investor meetings. It wasn't just business anymore. This was theft waiting to happen. She's playing long game, Devin said. Careful, clean. But she's not just aiming at you. She's aiming through you. I ended the call with a thank you and sat in the silence. The pieces were clicking into place. Alicia hadn't just prepared the prenup to protect herself. She was positioning herself as a future shareholder in a tech breakthrough she never built, all while parading around as the woman who believed in me from the beginning. That night, she was late again. Said her car broke down on her way home from a dress rehearsal with her sister. Funny, she didn't have a sister. I didn't say anything, just nodded and asked if she wanted wine. She smiled, tired, fake, and said, "You're being so patient with all this." Of course. It's our wedding. I want it to be perfect. That was lie number 4. She sipped her wine and leaned into me like she always did. Same rhythm, same smell, same illusion. But that night, something slipped. While she was in the bathroom, her phone buzzed. Normally, I wouldn't touch it. But my trust wasn't normal anymore. The message preview was short, just a name. Rylan. The message? Tomorrow's plan is locked, noon, same suite. I memorized it. She returned, humming as she pulled her hair into a bun, and I casually asked, "Do you know a Rylan?" She froze. It lasted maybe half a second, but it was enough. Then she smiled. "Just someone from the bridal team. They're handling venue logistics. Why?" "No reason," I lied, and kissed her shoulder. That night, I didn't sleep. I dug through every memory, every overlooked moment, every slip she'd made, every time she was late or stressed or meeting someone from planning. All of it added up to something rotten. And the worst part? I didn't even know if she loved me once, or if I'd just been convenient. The next morning, I beat her out of the apartment, left early, told her I had a breakfast meeting. Instead, I waited near the hotel. At 11:45, she walked in. Alone, no clipboard, no wedding planner's tote, no makeup team. She wore a navy coat and kept her head low. At 11:51, Rylan arrived, tall, polished, late 30s. Not a wedding planner. I'd seen him once, years ago, across a boardroom table when he worked as a strategy advisor for my rival, Donovan Cross. They shook hands like they'd done it before. Not awkward, not secretive, just professional and dangerous. They disappeared into the elevator. I didn't follow. I didn't need to. I already knew. I went home, poured myself a drink, and pulled the engagement ring from my drawer. It felt heavier than usual. I stared at it for a long time and thought about everything I had built and how close I'd come to handing it over to someone who'd never earned it. I wasn't heartbroken. I was furious. The headlines were merciless. Billionaire groom swaps bride at the altar. Tech CEO destroys gold digger fiancé's scheme in viral wedding twist. From lace to lawsuit, Alicia Brooks's fall from high society. Within 48 hours, my name was everywhere. I hadn't given a single interview, but the footage from a guest's phone did more damage than any press release ever could. Millions watched the moment Alicia's smile faded and Sienna stepped into frame. The look on Alicia's face when I told her it was a correction, not a joke. It was looped across TikTok and news outlets like a symphony of revenge. But behind the silence of my public front, I was preparing for the next move. Because Alicia wouldn't take this sitting down. No, she'd come back swinging. She'd come. She didn't waste time. 3 days after the wedding, an article appeared on a third-tier gossip blog. Anonymous source, grainy photos, and a headline that made my blood boil. Caleb Stevens' secret affairs exposed. Sources say his marriage swap was to hide a scandal. The article claimed I'd been cheating for months, that I had a history of emotional manipulation, that Alicia had been pressured into signing the prenup and blindsided by the betrayal. It was pathetic, but it spread. I called John. "She's trying to flip the narrative." "She's panicking," he replied, "which means she still thinks she has something to lose." "Do we know who fed that blog?" "Devin's tracing it now, but I'll bet anything the fingerprints lead to Rylan, or worse, Donovan Cross." The same day, I got a cease and desist letter from Alicia's new lawyer. Not Carson Rayner this time, someone dirtier. It accused me of defamation, breach of verbal contract, and emotional damages. I laughed when I read it. She'd gone from queen to beggar in less than a week. And now she was grasping at scraps of power in the only arena she had left: reputation. Sienna stayed at my place the next few nights. Not for romantic reasons, just protection. Alicia knew where I lived. She'd had keys once. I'd already changed the locks. Sienna didn't say much the first night. She just brought her laptop and worked from my kitchen like it was normal. Like she hadn't walked into a war zone with me. By the second night, she broke the silence. "Do you regret doing it this way?" I didn't answer immediately. I watched the rain crawl down the windows. "No," I said, "but I do regret ever believing her." Sienna nodded. "She underestimated you. That was her mistake." "No," I corrected. "I underestimated her." The next morning, Devin sent his report. Alicia had moved fast. She'd liquidated assets from a shell company she set up months ago. Offshore accounts, quiet money. She had prepared for a long game until I flipped the board. "She's got roughly $4 million sitting in accounts under aliases," Devin said over the phone. "But more interestingly, she's still talking to Rylan, daily, and she's requested a meeting with Donovan Cross." There it was. She wasn't out of moves. She was regrouping. "She's going to try to strike through him," I said. "Exactly. She knows you've shut her out directly, so she'll weaponize your competition." I looked out at the skyline, jaw tight. "Then let's give her nothing left to bargain with." John filed immediate motions to sever all remaining asset ties. Passwords changed. Banking access revoked. Every executive in my company required to recertify security credentials. I burned the last bridges she thought she still had, but I knew that wouldn't stop her. Later that evening, a bouquet of black dahlias arrived at my office. No note. Just a single card with one word: soon. My assistant brought it in with a confused look. I stared at it for a long moment, then dropped the entire bouquet into the trash. It was a message, not a gift. Alicia wasn't just angry. She was about to go nuclear. The first attack came at dawn. A viral clip surfaced on social media. A shaky recording of me in a parking garage, arguing with someone off-screen. The audio was distorted, but the caption told its own story. "CEO caught threatening woman after public humiliation." Within hours, #CancelCaleb trended. It wasn't real. The clip was from 2 years ago, a former investor confrontation taken out of context. Alicia's signature move: mix truth with lies, blur the line between reality and manipulation. John called first. "We're already issuing a statement. Don't engage." Sienna followed. "They're painting you as unstable. She's pulling emotion into this." I rubbed my forehead. "Then I'll hit back with evidence." "You already did," she said. "At the altar, but that was logic. This is blood." And she was right. Alicia wasn't playing chess anymore. She was lighting the board on fire. By noon, sponsors were calling. One major investor froze a pending round of funding. Another postponed a product launch until the controversy clears. The board demanded a crisis meeting. It didn't matter that the claims were baseless. In tech, perception was half the battle. Alicia knew it. So did Donovan. Devin called me from a burner. "She's setting up offshore interviews, long-form sympathetic profiles. She's leaning into the gaslit woman angle, framing you as emotionally abusive. Said you were paranoid, controlling, unfaithful. She's got a media team now, paid, aggressive, and good." I clenched my jaw. "How much did she pay them?" "About $500,000, likely from the liquidated account we couldn't freeze." Of course. She was reinvesting betrayal into PR. I sat in my office, staring at the reflection of my own face in the dark monitor. My enemies weren't just attacking my company now. They were dismantling me. But Alicia made one mistake. She thought I still cared about protecting my image. I pulled up a file from my encrypted drive. Devin's latest dig. A digital spider web connecting Alicia, Rylan, and 3 shell entities, one of which was funneling sensitive pitch deck data from my internal servers. It was industrial espionage, plain and brutal. And I had the chain of emails to prove it. All I needed now was timing. That evening, I received a message from an unknown number. "Still think this is about your company? I'm not done. Not until you lose everything. No signature, no need for one." I screenshotted it, logged it, forwarded it to John. She's unhinged, John said. That helps us. The court will see intent. She's too smart to leave fingerprints. She's emotional now. Emotional people make mistakes. I paused. What if she already did? That night, I reviewed everything again, the emails, the recordings, the digital trail. One server log didn't match. A file she tried to download from my development archive weeks ago, secure frame architecture. She'd failed. But in trying, she triggered a trace. And Devin found it. She used a third-party router to mask the access, he explained. But it wasn't clean. We can tie it back to her apartment Wi-Fi. That's enough, I said. That's our hammer. The next morning, I held the press conference. Not corporate, personal. I stood in front of reporters with my general counsel beside me, and I laid it bare. The attempted breach, the forged connections, the evidence of data theft, fraud, and collusion with my competitor. I didn't mention Alicia by name. I didn't have to. The moment I dropped the email excerpts, journalists started circling like wolves. And the silence from her camp? That said everything. It started with a text at midnight. We need to talk, off record, tonight. No name, but the number was familiar. Rylan. I stared at the screen for a long time, then sent a single reply. Location? He gave me an address. Private rooftop bar downtown. The kind of place where secrets got spilled in silence and no one asked questions. I didn't tell John. I didn't even tell Sienna. If this was what I thought it was, it had to be done quietly. Rylan was already there when I arrived, nursing a neat scotch and checking over his shoulder every 5 seconds. He looked up when I sat, didn't bother with pleasantries. She's off the rails, he said. You already know that, but it's worse than you think. I kept my expression still. Then make me understand. He ran a hand down his face, leaned in. This wasn't supposed to go this far. Donovan never wanted her involved past the prenup. She pitched him this plan like it was clean, strategic, low risk. And now? She's threatening people, fabricating messages, creating burner trails to pin on third parties. She's trying to bring your entire company down personally, even if it tanks everyone with her. And you're just realizing now that was a problem? I'm realizing she has nothing left to lose, he muttered. And when people like her hit that point, they don't care who burns. I narrowed my eyes. Why are you here, Rylan? He hesitated. Because she's dragging my name into it. She used my credentials to mask the breach. If this hits federal charges, I'm not going down for her. There it was, self-preservation, the most honest motivator in men like him. What do you want? Immunity? Clean break? And in exchange, I'll give you everything. Communications, meeting logs, the real draft of the prenup with Donovan's revisions. I'll testify if needed. I just want out before she tanks everyone. I took a slow breath. And what do you think that's worth to me? He looked me dead in the eyes. Your reputation, your company, your freedom. You're walking a legal line too, Stevens. You strike back too hard, they'll call it personal retaliation. But if I hand you the inside trail, it's corporate crime, clean, documented, prosecutable. He was right. This wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about closure, legally, publicly, finally. Send everything to my attorney by morning, I said. If the data checks out, we'll arrange protection and a written guarantee. He nodded once. You're lucky, he added. She really did love you once. I stood. No. She loved the power she thought I gave her. The next morning, John's inbox was flooded with files, voice recordings, email threads, even screenshots of Alicia drafting fake texts to make it seem like I'd threatened her. We had the kill shot, but I didn't release it. Not yet. Instead, we sent a quiet letter to Alicia's attorney. No threats. Just notice of intent to file criminal charges for corporate fraud, electronic trespass, and defamation, alongside a cease and desist demanding she retract all prior public statements. She didn't respond, but 3 hours later, her lawyer quit. The fallout began immediately. News leaked that Alicia's team had been using deepfake tools to craft audio evidence. Journalists turned on her. PR firms dropped her. One by one, allies distanced themselves. By evening, Alicia made a final desperate move. She posted a teary, heavily filtered video. "I just wanted to protect myself. I was so scared. He made me feel like I had to fight back." But the comments were different this time. "Too many lies. You almost destroyed an innocent man. You got caught." Even the public had begun to see through her. A queen without a throne, just a woman whose empire was built on deceit, and finally collapsing around her. Alicia made one last move, and it was the ugliest one yet. 2 days after her legal team dissolved and her social media apology video backfired, she showed up uninvited, at my office. Security caught her before she got past the lobby, but the cameras caught everything. Her screaming my name, sobbing, collapsing to the floor in her designer heels. She begged for a conversation, claimed she wanted closure. It was theater. Nothing more. I watched the footage from the security room in silence. John stood behind me, arms crossed. "She's building a defense," he said, trying to pivot again. "If she can't win the battle, she wants to look like she was destroyed by it." I turned away from the screen. "She's not even trying to be believable anymore." "No," he agreed, "because this isn't about truth for her. It's about narrative." I didn't press charges for the incident. I didn't need to. The footage leaked within hours, through a receptionist's phone, unofficially, accidentally, perfectly. The public ate it up again, but this time, not with sympathy. She just can't let go. From wedding scammer to office stalker. How did a woman like this get so close to Caleb Stevens? That question haunted me. How did I let her in? I'd spent years building walls no one could scale. But she didn't climb them. She made me invite her over. She told me I was safe, that she believed in me. She spoke in future tense, about us, about building something together. And I wanted to believe it so badly that I handed her the keys to everything. Not because I was weak, because I was human. That night, I stood on my balcony with a drink in my hand and watched the city burn through fog. Sienna joined me quietly. She didn't say anything at first. She just stood beside me in that way only she could. Present, unintrusive, real. "She's gone quiet," she said after a while, "because she knows she's lost. People like her don't lose. Not really. They implode." I nodded slowly. "Which is why I'm done playing her game." I handed the last of Alicia's data to the district attorney the next morning. The theft, the manipulation, the fabricated messages, the entire trail, complete with Ryland's testimony, securely notarized and delivered. They opened an investigation immediately, not civil, criminal. Charges were filed quietly: fraud, corporate espionage, malicious defamation. And just like that, Alicia Brooks was no longer a scandal. She was a defendant. I didn't hold a press conference. I didn't post about it. I just went back to work. For the first time in months, my team smiled again. Meetings were efficient. Investors reappeared. The weight that had hung over every boardroom, every inbox, every late-night emergency call, lifted. But healing wasn't loud. It was silent, uneven, slow. Some nights I still heard her voice. Some mornings I remembered the way she looked at me, before I knew what was behind it. And sometimes I wondered if any of it had ever been real. Sienna found me one night staring at the blank TV in my living room. She sat down next to me, no questions asked. After a long silence, I asked, "Did I destroy her?" She looked at me, really looked. "No," she said. "You survived her. She destroyed herself." That night I slept for the first time in weeks. Not deeply, but enough to know. It was finally over. The courthouse smelled like bleach and old paper. I sat outside courtroom 7B in a navy suit, fingers laced together, jaw tight. I wasn't nervous. I was ready. Next to me, John reviewed our packet one last time. "She's going to try to stall, delay, drag this out until it's not about what she did, but how long we let it breathe." "I'm not here for revenge," I said quietly. "I'm here for clarity." Across the hallway, I saw her arrive. Alicia wore gray, not designer this time, not silk or satin or subtle branding stitched into the sleeves. Just a plain suit, hair tied back, makeup barely there. Her lawyer whispered something and she nodded, but her eyes were somewhere else. Not angry, not vengeful, empty. For a moment, I almost didn't recognize her. And then she looked up and saw me. She didn't flinch, didn't smile. She just stared, unblinking. We hadn't spoken since the day I left her standing at the altar. But somehow, this silence was louder. We entered the courtroom, and everything slowed. The judge, a woman in her 50s with steel gray hair and no patience for theatrics, called the session to order. This wasn't a trial yet. It was a preliminary hearing to determine if Alicia would be formally indicted and held for trial, or if her defense could punch enough holes to delay it. Her new attorney, sleek, overconfident, opened with predictable theatrics. She was coerced into agreements she didn't understand. She was emotionally abused. She made poor decisions under duress. None of it surprised me. What did surprise me was Alicia's posture, still passive, like a puppet waiting for her strings to move. Then John stood. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't grandstand. He just laid out the facts, the breach logs, the shell company, the fabricated texts, the forged voice memos. Then came Ryland's affidavit. He'd refused to appear in person, citing safety concerns. But his sworn statement was enough to bring the room to a hush. He detailed the meetings, the payments, the drafted schemes Alicia led. He confirmed she'd planned the prenup a year in advance, proposed to Caleb specifically to trigger the acquisition plan, and intended to leverage the marriage to take over Secure Frame's intellectual property. Alicia didn't react, not until the judge asked the final question. "Miss Brooks, do you understand the charges being brought against you?" A pause, then a quiet, "Yes, Your Honor." Her voice was smaller than I remembered. Then came the moment I hadn't prepared for. The judge turned to me. "Mr. Stevens, you are not required to speak at this hearing. But if you'd like to offer a statement for the record, now is your opportunity." John put a hand on my arm. "You don't have to." But I stood anyway. "I won't talk about what she took," I began, "or what she tried to take, because it's not just money or code or reputation. It's time, it's peace, it's trust." A few heads turned in the gallery. "I'm not here to punish her," I continued. "I'm here because I believed in someone who made me question every instinct I ever had. And if this court sees fit to hold her accountable, not just for me, but for the precedent this sets for others like her, then that's enough." I sat down. And for the first time since she entered the room, Alicia looked at me like a person. Not a target, not a prize, just a man she broke, and who survived. The judge recessed briefly. 10 minutes later, she returned. "This court finds sufficient evidence to proceed with formal charges. Trial date will be set within 30 days. The gavel fell. Alicia was escorted out. She didn't look back. Neither did I. Day 1 of the trial, I walked into the courtroom without John. Not because I didn't need him, but because I wanted to enter as Caleb. Not as a CEO behind a wall of lawyers. No armor, no entourage. Just a man who'd been lied to, and finally stood tall anyway. The courtroom was full. Reporters, former associates, strangers. And somewhere in the back, I saw a young developer from my team. Someone I'd once hired on instinct and never had time to really know. He nodded at me. I nodded back. They were here not just to witness justice. They were watching to see what justice looked like. Alicia entered 5 minutes late. She didn't wear gray anymore. She wore white, not wedding white, but courtroom white. Clean, soft, calculated. Innocence by design. But she couldn't control her eyes. They twitched, flicked from the jury box to me, to the cameras that were allowed only for select moments. The trial started with the prosecution outlining her scheme. Targeted manipulation, financial deception, industrial espionage. They brought up expert witnesses, cyber specialists, former business consultants, and even 2 journalists who admitted to being fed planted stories by someone using aliases linked to her financial accounts. Day 2, they played the tapes. The courtroom sat in total silence as Alicia's own voice filled the air. "Once it's signed, I'll have leverage. He won't even see it coming." She'd said that to Rylan. He'd recorded it. And now it echoed off oak-paneled walls, every syllable a nail in the image she tried so hard to preserve. Alicia didn't look at the screen. She kept her eyes down. But I saw her shoulders twitch. On day 3, I was called to the stand. I'd prepared for it, or thought I had, But nothing prepares you for looking across a courtroom at the person you once thought would be your wife and describing in legal detail how she dismantled your trust piece by piece. They asked me everything. Why I stayed silent for so long. Why I didn't confront her earlier. Why I chose to expose her at the wedding. Why I didn't retaliate through backdoor deals like most men in my position would. My answer never changed. Because I needed to understand what I was dealing with. Not just legally, but emotionally. She wasn't trying to steal money. She was trying to erase who I was. The judge watched me closely. So did the jury. And so did Alicia. For the first time, her eyes locked with mine, and she didn't blink. The defense did what they could, argued that the recordings were out of context, that Alicia was coerced by more powerful men, that she was a scapegoat for Caleb's bruised ego. But they were grasping at ghosts. Alicia's silence said more than their arguments ever could. On the fourth day, Sienna came to court. She didn't testify. She just sat behind me, calm, composed, the opposite of the storm I used to live in. During recess, she leaned forward and whispered, "You don't look like someone who's winning a trial." "I'm not," I whispered back. "I'm surviving one." That night I stood alone on my balcony again. Same drink, same skyline, but a different heart. This trial, I realized, was never about her. It was about the version of me that let her in, and the part of me that still needed to forgive him. The courtroom was colder that day, or maybe I was just noticing it for the first time. The jury had been out for 7 hours, long enough for the press outside to speculate, long enough for my staff to text me twice asking if they should prep a statement, long enough for me to forget what it felt like not to wait. John sat next to me again. Sienna was behind us. She didn't speak. She just had her hand resting near mine on the bench, not touching, just close enough to know I wasn't alone. Alicia sat across the aisle, flanked by 2 defense attorneys and a blank legal pad. She hadn't written on it all trial. She still hadn't today. When the bailiff announced the jury was returning, the room exhaled. Then it held its breath. 12 jurors entered. Some avoided my eyes. A few glanced at Alicia. One, the youngest, locked eyes with her for a long, unreadable second before turning away. The judge addressed the court, asked the foreperson to stand. "Has the jury reached a unanimous verdict?" "We have, Your Honor. Please proceed." I don't know what I expected to feel. Nausea, numbness, vindication. What I felt was nothing, not until I heard it. "On count 1, wire fraud, we find the defendant guilty." Alicia didn't blink. "On count 2, unlawful access to protected systems, we find the defendant guilty." She sat straighter, but her face stayed blank, as if it wasn't about her anymore. "On count 3, defamation with malicious intent, we find the defendant guilty." I didn't move. I didn't look at John. I didn't even exhale until the judge nodded, satisfied. Sentencing would be scheduled separately. But this part, this was final. The gavel dropped. The courtroom buzzed, then silenced again as Alicia rose slowly to her feet. Her lawyer leaned in, whispered something. She didn't react. But then, just before the bailiff approached, she turned. Not to the jury, not to the judge, to me. Her lips parted, just slightly, and for a moment I thought she might speak. But she didn't. She just looked, at me, at Sienna, at the empty space she'd once occupied beside me. Then she nodded once, just a fraction of a movement, and turned away. I walked out without a word. Outside, microphones waited like vultures. I pushed through them without speaking. My silence was the only answer they were going to get. Later that night, I sat alone in my office. John had gone home. Sienna had offered to stay, but I told her I needed the quiet. I poured a drink, looked out over the city, and whispered aloud, just once, "She's gone." Not just legally, not just from my name or my company, gone from my mind, gone from the place in my heart where I once stored her laugh, her scent, her lies disguised as affection. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt still. And in that stillness, something new emerged. Possibility. I didn't plan to speak at her sentencing. I told myself I'd said everything I needed to say. But that morning, as I dressed and stood in front of the mirror, I realized there was still something left, not for her, for me. Courtroom 4A was quieter this time. No media, no press section. Just a few legal clerks, Alicia's new public defender, the judge, and me. Sienna wasn't there. I hadn't asked her to come. Alicia entered in cuffs. Orange jumpsuit, no makeup, no pretense. The courtroom lights were unkind. They stripped her of everything she used to weaponize: beauty, charm, posture. What was left was just a person. Not powerful, not dangerous, just lost. The judge read the formalities. Then she asked if anyone would like to offer a victim impact statement. I stood. My voice didn't shake. My hands didn't tremble. I didn't bring notes. I spent a long time believing that strength meant silence. I began. That if someone betrays you, you handle it quietly, privately. You bury the damage and move on. I looked at Alicia, but not with anger. With her, I tried that. I ignored the signs. I let her inside the walls I'd spent my whole life building. And when she betrayed me, not just emotionally, but professionally, legally, personally, I convinced myself that walking away without confrontation was dignity. I exhaled. But dignity is not silence. Dignity is truth. And the truth is, this woman nearly cost me everything. Not just my company, but my belief in good people. Alicia lowered her gaze. I'm not here to demand punishment. I'm not here to hope she suffers. I'm here because I needed to finish the sentence she started, and never gave me the chance to finish. I turned to the judge. I trust the court. I accept whatever ruling you see fit, because for the first time since this began, I don't feel like I need to fight anymore. I sat down, and that was the last thing I ever said to Alicia Brooks. The judge sentenced her to 4 years in federal prison, with possibility of parole after 2. Not the maximum, but enough. Alicia didn't cry, didn't beg. She nodded once when the gavel fell, then let herself be led out of the room like a shadow leaving the frame. It was over. That night I walked home instead of driving. It was late, cold. The streets were mostly empty, and I liked it that way. Every sound, every step on the pavement felt louder, real. Outside my apartment, Sienna was waiting. She didn't speak at first. Then she asked, "Did it help?" I paused. "Not in the way I thought it would." She nodded. "But maybe in the way it needed to." I looked at her, really looked, and realized something simple and staggering. She wasn't standing there for closure. She was standing there for what's next. "You know," I said slowly, "if I hadn't met you back then, I might not have had the strength to face all this." She smiled. "I didn't give you strength, Caleb. You already had it. I just reminded you where to look." I didn't kiss her that night, not yet. But I did take her hand. And this time, there were no cameras, no secrets, no traps, just 2 people, no longer pretending to be anything they weren't. Alicia never got that kind of ending. She never wanted love. She wanted control. And in chasing it, she lost the one thing she thought she had all along: me. 1 month later, my phone buzzed with a headline I didn't open. Alicia Brooks denied bail appeal, set to serve full sentence. I didn't even swipe to read it. I had a meeting with my new product team at 10, a brunch with my younger engineers at noon. Sienna was flying back in from a strategy summit she hosted in Chicago, and I'd planned dinner. Normal things, healthy things, real life. Life that had nothing to do with her anymore. I hadn't spoken publicly about the trial. I didn't sign a book deal. I didn't give an exclusive. The silence that once used to haunt me now felt like a sanctuary. Let people speculate. Let them archive it for clicks and gossip. I had no desire to turn a story of betrayal into currency. I'd already lost enough time to her. The only thing I gave the world was a statement, short, clear. I will not define my future by the actions of someone who only knew how to manipulate the past. I am focused on building, not reliving. Thank you for respecting my decision to move on quietly. And they did. Mostly. Sienna moved in 2 weeks after Alicia's sentencing, though we didn't announce it. We didn't call it anything. She just showed up with a suitcase, kissed me on the cheek, and said, "I got tired of flying home just to see you." I remember laughing. Not because it was romantic, but because it was easy. I didn't need fireworks anymore. I just needed peace. Sometimes we talked about Alicia. Rarely. Usually in passing. Like the way you talk about a nightmare you barely remember. Not because it didn't terrify you, but because the sun eventually came up. Other times, we didn't talk at all. We just worked side by side, built something new, shared space without needing to fill it. I found myself again in small ways. I took early morning walks without checking my email. I started calling my mom's old friend once a week just to talk. I invited a former intern to lunch and gave him advice I wished someone had given me 10 years ago. I even went to therapy, not because I was broken, but because I'd spent too long convincing myself I wasn't allowed to heal. One session, my therapist asked me something simple. Do you regret ever meeting her? And I thought about it. Longer than I expected. Then I said, no. I regret not walking away sooner, but without her, I never would have learned how much of myself I was willing to give away just to feel chosen. That was the last time I cried about her. It wasn't grief. It was release. One afternoon I got an email. No sender name, no reply address. Just 3 words, you never loved me. I stared at it for a while, then deleted it. Not because I was afraid of her, but because I didn't need to answer. She was wrong. I did love her. That's what made her betrayal matter. But what made my survival stronger was knowing I would never love anyone like that again. Not blindly, not desperately, not quietly while losing pieces of myself just to keep the illusion alive. Sienna asked me once as we sat watching the sun break through over the harbor, do you think she ever truly knew what she lost? I answered without hesitation. No, because she never valued what couldn't be owned. And maybe that's the point. Some people chase control their entire lives and call it love. But the real power? That's found in letting go. I didn't win. I walked away. And sometimes that's the most victorious ending of all.